rest of life.
Big Bad Builders of Time is running out, as we have joined with some of the stalwarts of the Cladding Matters podcast. Of course, Hamish McClay of Search Convey, Steve Day of buildingsafetyskin.org, and we are joined by special guest Matt Hodges-Long, Building Safety Register. Now, what interesting times we live in. Today's discussion is going to focus around leasehold and building safety, putting it under the spotlight. And as is traditional on this channel, Hamish McClay, off you go.
The one thing we can actually say about our particular sort of podcast is it does continue on a weekly basis, and it continues to outline some of the challenges faced that those who are living ostensibly in sort of flats have to face on a day-to-day basis. And this month particularly, there's been an awful lot of changes, but it's best, I think, we sort of hand over to Steve to sort of catch up with. He's been busy earlier part of the week, particularly trying to bring matters on from a political perspective. And Matt, of course, is constantly keeping records which aren't available through normal channels on the sort of status of people having to move out of their homes because of the cladding issues. There is a momentum in terms of the challenges that people are facing rather than resolving the situation, which is a sad thing. But hopefully something can be said. Maybe Steve can bring something, maybe Matt too can bring something to say there are some positive things happening as well.
No, I'm not usually that much of a cynical person. You may laugh at that. But Steve, we are looking for some chinks in that silver lining.
Well, I think we got some silver in the silver lining, actually.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so of course, I was on the speaker list at the Bournemouth conference for one of the Liberal Democrat conference on the housing, leasehold and building safety motion that actually passed, I'm pleased to say, in the conference. And I was able to speak on the building safety aspects of it because obviously that's the area that I'm most knowledgeable on, not through wanting to be an expert, but through it being thrust upon me, I might add. And I'm not really an expert. I'm just someone that's done a lot of research in my fight. But yeah, so I have, though, listened to a lot of experts like Matt here and many others, and have actually managed to put together two things which I think would help people like me and around the country. And that was basically what I spoke on. And you can see it on my LinkedIn. If you go to LinkedIn, you see my video, and it was basically calling for two things. One is an end to the partial remediation standard, PAS 9980, which allows banned combustible material that wouldn't pass current building regulations to stay on existing buildings. Now, that's unacceptable because that basically condemns people to permanently high insurance. Safety risks with the growing number of e-bikes I've seen charged in our stairwells next to these second most combustible XPS panels in Europe, Euroclass E rated. And it also means if we have a partial remediation standard, there's a risk of one day us having to have it done properly. So for lots of reasons, it doesn't make sense to have this two-tier of remediation standards. And of course, the second tier is the definition of building safety risk under the Building Safety Act 2022, which does cover breaches of building regulations at the time of construction and current building regulations. And the case law supports that we've seen go through the first tier tribunals. So that's what we're calling for. The government doesn't have to fight us that we're reinventing the wheel, like they've accused us of on numerous occasions at various dispatch boxes in both houses with the Earls scheme. We're saying use the definition you've already put into law, please, and get rid of this dodgy subjective PAS standard, which is causing all this trouble. So that's our first amendment. And I say amendment, it's going to be in the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, And I'm very happy to say that Gideon Amos's team has worked very closely with me. Yes, we will be creating a working group to actually work with experts to get these amendments justified and in the best possible form that we can to get them into the bill, which is going to report stage in the Lords just after recess. So we've got about 4 weeks and then it all kicks off. So it's going to be quite exciting. Yeah, so that working group, we'll have our first meeting in the next couple of weeks. And
well, I'm gonna do this for you. There we go. Hooray!
Yes,
yeah, I've been itching to do that ever since I got the facility a couple of weeks ago. But yes, it's great news. It's
Let me
great
just say what the second thing is. The second thing we're calling for is the funding of those 1.7 million excluded leaseholders, like my friend Amanda, who lost her life. And we want to ensure that there's a wide construction industry levy. Daniel Greenberg's given us the drafting. And it means we can levy different classes of construction industry, like the cladding product manufacturers, not just cladding, any product manufacturer. We can look at the size of construction firm and make sure they don't go bust. So we can set the levy rates at a granular level using this legislation. So that will mean the outcome of all 1.7 million excluded leaseholders will be funded, and also those that are undergoing, like we are, partial remediations. If we can get it into law fast enough, we might be able to save our fire shafts and make sure that gets done, because it will be done retrospectively for remediations that are in progress. It won't be, unfortunately, be able to cover where remediation has completed. But the problem we have is, this is where the urgency is. As each remediation gets completed, we can't really help. So we want to get this in. Unfortunately, we have a very good opportunity here with the planning and infrastructure bill. But that's the update from the conference. So look closely at Cladding Matters, all that are viewing, because this is where we could actually get something quite exciting into Parliament. And that working group, those that have been asked will reveal themselves, and hopefully we'll be able to talk more about that when the first meetings happened, and we can say what's going on.
Now, I know that there are viewers there from both councils and government, so I urge you to follow the process of this on Cladding Matters, and hopefully we'll end up with those chinks of light being actual bits of silver in that silver lining. Welcome to the program, Matt. Now, the last time we spoke, you weren't in the best frame of mind. You weren't very positive, and you've just literally recovered or recovering from COVID. So welcome back. Hopefully you're in fine fooling. What are your thoughts?
Well, on cue. Well, I mean, firstly, I like to think of myself as being an eternal optimist. And although I may sound a bit down about things at times, you know, ultimately I'm still banging this particular drum 6 years later after first starting it. But I mean, firstly, you know, props to Steve for sticking with it and actually managing to get a large political party to get behind him and work with him, because, you know, that is difficult. Carving out any time in a parliamentarian's diary is hard enough, but to try and get party policy behind you is really good. And, you know, ultimately they have a block of MPs that may well be able to sway the vote. Certainly, hopefully we'll be able to get some airtime and appeal to the judgment of the government to say, do you know what, that's an idea that maybe we should take on, and is one that is probably more interesting to people and more exciting than digital ID, for example. So maybe there's an opportunity for that to be dropped in at the appropriate moment. And I think just purely on the political front, you know, this is a massive vote winner. Whoever can sort this problem out is doing the right thing for society, but is also doing the right thing politically in terms of, you know, ultimately winning votes and converting people to your cause. So, well,
it's a bit like justice, isn't it? It's all very well for justice to be done. It needs to be seen to be done. And this, in a similar way, if you can demonstrate that you are absolutely doing this, preventing death, let's face it, and also improving the lives of people. And on a different show, we often talk about this, do we not, Hamish, where we are talking about the amount of people who could be first-time buyers, but there's all these places that are sitting there fallow and unusable because of this. I mean, you're quite right. A potential massive vote winner.
Yeah, I think so. And, you know, and I think having read through the motion that Steve was speaking to, there are a lot of elements of it that I violently agree with, some that I'm neutral on, and some that I just think, no, that's wrong. And now I'm hoping that in the formulation of the policy, a lot of those areas will be ironed out or debated and talked about, because there are some statements in there that are just kind of plainly wrong. But I think my understanding is this is sort of written by activists, and then it goes through the policy mill, if you like, to become proper sort of grown-up policy. So I don't think we should get too sort of confused by what is a conference motion versus what becomes the policy of any particular party, or how that might translate into amendments to a bill, for example, because that goes through the lawyers and lots of scrutiny. So I think my understanding from what Steve's told me is that it's sort of been, the general thrust has been agreed. Now it's about sitting down and actually ironing out the detail. And
the working group.
Yeah, and I guess knowing which areas to push. Yeah, which hill do you die on, so to speak, and which ones do you give ground on? So I think that's all to come.
Hamish, it seems to me that this is about the first time in as many months as I can remember that we've got anything really positive to bark on about. It feels like we could be beginning the process of rounding the corner. I'm not saying we have rounded the corner, but beginning that process.
Very, very important, and it's when we look at from the outset, when we were actually speaking, when we first started speaking about this, and I think we've been airing now for more than 12 months, probably.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
We seem to, as time was progressing, we just seem to be getting deeper and deeper into the whole of the situation.
Yes.
So in fairness, and sort of Matt knows this full well, because he's very, very more up to date with, if you like, day-to-day issues. He gets involved with many more specific issues. There are still some serious things. We only know what we know so far. There are still many, many areas that haven't actually been covered, many buildings which haven't been pursued. And very recently, we've just seen even lower type buildings. It's not those 11 meters, never mind the 18, the 8 below 18 meters. Those we've had problems with those below 11 meters, and nobody's even looked at those to a large extent. So there's still much to be done, but you have to put a stake in the ground. And the great thing, and Matt sort of pointed this out, the fact that we have a party which has felt the need to bring this up at one of their conferences and take that major sort of point and that major issue to start the discussions. Everybody has got to start taking notice now. And it's definitely going to be a vote winner, particularly for those, and we know there are millions of people who are in this particular situation of entrapment. So it is a great, but it's really down to the hard work with Steve and his team particularly. And obviously we can rely on the information that comes through from Matt to actually sort of help that sort of go through. And it's getting those right experts back to this, isn't it? This resonates just through everything we speak about, working with the right team, because Matt has already pointed out, there seems to be a slight imbalance here. And so, but by getting the right people, you can differ on certain things. It's not an argument. It's a discussion about the whole thing, but we're on the way. We're on the way.
Matt, I have to say, I'm slightly cheered up by the fact that this is now becoming front and center, at least for a major party. Yes, I know they're not either Labour or Reform or any of the other ones that are banging their sabres a lot, but they are a major party, and it could be a strong influencer as to policy making going forward.
Yeah, I think it's very easy to sort of make populist noises about all of this. This is terrible, we'll get it sorted or whatever. It's actually a lot harder to actually come up with policy that can be implemented, can be afforded, isn't going to fall apart at the first hurdle. And I think that's where having a group that know about how to legislate, have been in government before, some of the, etc., have some momentum is really important, and are probably more aligned in terms of being able to get the Labour government to actually listen. And so I think quite often it's, who's actually bringing this message forward? Are they acceptable to work with, kind of thing? So I think it's really good. And I to pick up on a point that sort of Hamish sort of alluded to, that I was just sort of thinking then about, a foothills metaphor of where are we, and I thought, no, actually it's the other way. It's the Mariana Trench, and we're on the way down one side of it. We don't know where the bottom is yet, and at some point, hopefully, we'll climb up the other side, and we're still on that downwards trajectory in terms of understanding where are the problems, what are the problems, how much are they going to cost. So for anybody to think that this all happened 8 years ago and it's nearly done, surely we're nearly a decade in, will be sorely mistaken.
I think from my impression, that the action, really sensible action to actually work out what the unknown unknowns are, has only started relatively recently. So the fact that we are traveling down, but I still feel, Steve, full of positives, that there is a willingness to travel down into the depths of the unknown to find out what else there is to find, so we can then start up the other side, putting things right.
Well, I mean, I think what Matt's saying there is we need to, as part of this work, we need to make sure that not only are we covering the remediations, but we find out what remediations need to be covered. Because if you only cover, 12% of the problem, and there's, they don't want to know about the other percent, then you're not solving the problem. So you could put in all the protections you like, but if you don't know the problem. So I think, that's exactly why we will be working with experts like Matt and many others to understand the size of the problem, so we can put amendments down which forces the government to look at the size of it as well as covering the protections, because we need really to force them, because they probably don't want to look at the buildings below 18 meters really in any detail. And they probably don't really want to look about the ones above 80 meters, but they're kind of being forced into it because they got the building safety regulator, but they don't have that below 18 meters. So, there's a whole area where we need to force them, and that will be one of the amendments, to force the government to look at the size of the problem and to make it publicly, well, maybe not publicly available, but available for scrutiny, just so we can hold them to account. Because I don't think the government are actually wanting to know the size of the problem, because they've got a stake in this with their public funding. They've got taxpayer funding on some of this. So, they want to limit the liability to themselves. So they're not necessarily coming at this without some vested interest. But what I'll say just briefly on the leasehold reform motions, Matt mentioned it. I think we're going to have Gideon Amos on Cladding Matters. And we should ask him a little bit more on the leasehold reform. But it's just for background, leasehold reform and building safety are separate issues. They're often conflated, and often you'll see that leasehold is blamed for the building safety crisis. If only it wasn't leasehold and it was common hold, then you would all be okay and you wouldn't have these high bills. That is rubbish. You're going to get an expensive bill if you own the freehold or not. And it's going to be worse if you own the freehold, because you're going to have to ask your neighbours for the money.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say the problems remain the same. It's just how they're resolved becomes different.
I'm not saying there's not abuses in the leasehold system, but there could be abuses in the common hold system. And all I'm saying is, let's try and keep these issues separate, because they've been conflated for too long, and that's why we need to focus on the split. And Matt, do you want to say anything about it? Because I know you've...
That's not my focus. I think one of the key... I was going to raise the point, actually, because I think I mentioned that there were areas in the motion that I agree with, and others that I definitely... One of the things I really object to in the Lib Dem motion, and hopefully that will get dealt with, is to quote, "The cladding scandal proves that the leasehold model demonstrably fails to ensure tenant safety." Full stop. Now, I haven't seen that link. I would like somebody to explain to me what that implicit link is. Buildings of all tenures have been built badly and to a dangerous level and have been poorly managed. Some of them are leasehold, a lot of them are because that's the system. But I think we just got to be very, very careful with our language, using terms like fleecehold in motions. It's a motive sort of populist language, but I don't think it moves the debate forward. I think it certainly gets people interested and excited. But for me as a professional in this space, I don't find it helpful, because I think sometimes it deflects from the real core issue that underlies the problem.
I think it's being used as a bat just because somebody's got because there is an agenda around leasehold reform and all the rest of it. But as you say, it doesn't really matter whether it's leasehold or freehold. There's still the problems remain the same. It's just the resolution.
Ironically, the upside of being a leaseholder involved in the building safety crisis is that you have far more protection than being a freeholder or a common holder. So in terms of your recourse to other people's money to fix a problem that you didn't create. So whether you part own the freehold or you're a leaseholder, one thing that's the commonality is you didn't cause this problem.
Right.
In one form of tenure, you've got some recourse to other people's money. In the other one, you haven't, or it's restricted. So I think we just need to unpick those debates and understand where they overlap, but not confuse the two. And right back to post-Grenfell, the building safety crisis that emerged was jumped upon by leasehold reform people to drive through leasehold reform. And quite often those people that were driving through leasehold reform were not involved in the building safety crisis themselves, because they were talking about leasehold houses, for example. So this really hasn't been a helpful conflation of the debate. They are both issues that are really important, need to be dealt with. There's abuse, and there are elements of overlap, but they are not the same issue as Steve said.
All right. Steve, any last words before I pass back to Hamish just to round up?
Yeah, well, just on there's an element of the amendments that are funding the situation. This is where they overlap. So, and we'll hear more about this when we discuss with Gideon Amos. But one of the things that the agenda of the sort of leasehold abolitionist groups, they want to eliminate ground rent. They want to abolish it on existing leases, which means stealing an income stream from the freeholders. Now, that has repercussions. If you steal agreed income streams, that's expropriation. But if you aren't too bothered about the expropriation and the effect on investors, there's another problem, and this is where it overlaps. So the majority of the freeholders will be pushed into insolvency if you steal all their stuff, all these income streams. So therefore, it can blow up the freeholder funding under the Building Safety Act, because they don't exist anymore. So if you've got your freeholder that's insolvent, going to pay for your remediation, then you're going to have a bit of a problem, because although you can't be charged for the remediation under the Building Safety Act, there's no one to pay for it. They've stolen all their stuff. They're insolvent. So that's a bit of a problem. That's another thing we're addressing. Thank you very much.
Well, lovely bit of reality check there from Steve. I want to just throw back to Hamish. Would you please take us home?
Well, I think we've concluded that there's a little bit more to life. It would be lovely to just sort of sit here and sort of ponder and look at the woods behind me and just pass the day doing that. But the trouble is, we're rather restricted in life by a lot of things that are put in place that we have no control over, and this is really what's happening all around us with the whole of the property sector, whether it be construction, whether it be the builders. There's so much that needs to go in there, and the important thing is let's try and create some accountability there. And obviously what's happening, what Steve's been able to do with the sort of information that Matt brings to the table, there is that understanding which is evolving, which we didn't have before. It's not it's nothing straightforward in it. But even if we can just start with the stages, if we can start putting this into practice and that into practice, get rid of things like a standard, which is absolutely no use to anybody at all, apart from an excuse for a builder or a developer to get away with only part remedying a situation rather than the full thing. So the discussions are absolutely vital. It's great to see them, and it is that chink. It is that little bit of brightness sort of coming through.
We have been desperately looking for that. A bit of late commentary. Zara Olibukas, friend of the show, shared owners do not really have any recourse. Housing associations appear to be unwilling to pursue developers.
Mm.
Can I have some commentary on that, please?
Yeah, happy to jump in on that. I think I probably know more than I should about this particular issue that Zara's raised. Yeah, there are modern buildings that have been built fairly recently where there are issues that need to be remediated that should definitely not be issues for a building of that age. And the individual resident is powerless to actually pursue the people that should be footing the bill. So you are dependent upon a leaseholder above you, which might be the housing association. So you're a shared ownership leaseholder. You have a housing association sitting above you that are a leaseholder, and they've got to work their way up the chain. And ultimately, if your housing association doesn't fight your corner to get the remediation initiated, you can't really do that yourself, or it's very difficult to do it yourself. But this does really swing back to the point that, is it feasible that if you buy a 2 or 3 year old building from a well-known developer, or you buy into that, is it reasonable to expect that somebody would then come in and do a survey and condemn your building and present somebody with a large check to put it right, or a large bill to put it right? And I would personally say, no. My neighbours with their Kia, when the handbrake went, they got a hire car and it got replaced free of charge when the part came in from South.
Quite right.
So that's where we are. You know, back to the whole sort of the tweezer analogy. If you get a better guarantee with the tweezers than you do with a brand new flat or whatever, this is just plain wrong, and it needs to be resolved. And the work that Steve's doing hopefully will embolden everybody's rights to actually not have to foot silly bills like this.
Well, thank you once again, Hamish McKay, for putting together such an important channel. Steve Day, as ever, from the Building Safety Scheme.org, who is a prominent figure in promoting getting this sorted and in front of as a motion in front of the government. Matt Hodges-Long for his excellent work in Building Safety Register. And thank you all for attending. The commentary will continue until we get somewhere. If those in government or in councils don't like it, why don't they come on the show and refute it? We would absolutely love to have you. You'll have a warm and comfortable home here. But until next week, keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and please try and look after that mental health. Bye-bye now.
There's a tale about some folks with hammers and some nails. They'll polish you the moon